Hey, folks, good evening, and thanks for joining me on Phantoms and Monsters Radio. I welcome all new listeners and members to the channel, and as well as first timers in the chat. Thanks for showing up. So, tonight we're going to be talking about unknown biological entities. It's human nature to be fearful of the unknown. That being stated, many people are aware that there is more to our existence than what we see on Earth. Now, we seek answers to questions about a higher intelligence beyond the bounds of this planet. In the course of these inquiries, we ask if the powers that be have secret knowledge of non-terrestrial races and technology. Now, eventually, we wonder if official disclosure of the truth will ever be communicated to the populace. I truly doubt the truth will ever be communicated to the populace, or an overwhelming incident leaves government no other choice. Now, when I act that we would be kind of spoon-fed any information. So I'm finished being cynical about government disclosure. But however, I do believe that experiencer disclosure and the evidence procured from their encounters offer us an actual sense of the truth. Now, before I go any further, I want to include a brief statement about receiving witness information, because I'm asked about this a lot. You know, I realized a long time ago that it's best to listen to what people tell you, make detailed notes along the way, and then compare the information with other reports and known facts. Now, this also includes being open-minded and initially giving the experiencer the benefit of the doubt. Now, when asking questions, it's best to be brief to clarify their statement. Otherwise, the witness may begin to include embellished information. Now, after several decades of interviewing witnesses, being able to separate the wheat from the chaff becomes second nature. And I have learned that a high percentage of witnesses believe they had a remarkable sighting or an unexplained encounter. They took the time to trust you or to trust me with their information, which is an important factor to consider. So, unknown entity experiencer reports can quickly trigger skepticism in an investigator. Now, the demeanor of the individual is usually full of fear, confusion, and uncontrolled emotion. It's important to listen and avoid making instant judgments based on the first interaction. But sometimes you'll receive a call in which you know that something remarkable occurred in this person's life and that you are now about to become part of their story. So, before I go any further, I want to mention that this channel is made possible by you clicking on the subscribe and like buttons and by you sharing our programming. If you're watching us on YouTube, the super chat and super thanks donations are appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below the chat box. The Buy Me a Coffee link and other donation links are also shown in the description, so thanks for your consideration. Your comments are always welcome. Tell me which accounts you find interesting in the presentation or suggestions for upcoming shows. Again, I want to thank our chat moderators, Bernadette, Marla, Thomas, and Mike, as well as Kevin and Mary at ESP Network. Now, if you're in the chat and you have a question, please use all caps, and I'll try to get to your question at the end of the presentation. Now, this first account, I received a telephone call from an eyewitness in Tennessee on February 26, 2018. The account he gave me was one of the strangest I've ever heard or read. So he tells me in the early summer of 1985, the witness, R.O., and two other friends were in the Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area. They were exiting the park while traveling south on Route 49, which is the Woodlands Trace Byway, towards Dover, Tennessee. The three men were sitting together in a Ford Ranger, the driver, J.M., and R.O. sitting beside each other. The other friend, T.G., was sitting on the passenger side. It was early evening and still light. Now, as they approached a curve in the road, an older model gray-colored sedan was in the opposite lane coming towards them. The sedan slowed as if the driver wanted to talk. Now, as J.M. and R.O. looked at the other driver, they were soon horrified at the sight. R.O. stated that the other driver had wild, bushy hair and wore glasses. Now, when the person turned their head towards him, the eyes appeared to be oversized. The driver's window was open. Suddenly, this being or humanoid extended its head out the window as the neck stretched to an incredible length. The face shapeshifted, taking on a bizarre contorted appearance. The head was now upside down and looking at them, at the same time making loud woo, woo, woo sounds and howling sounds. It was a dreadful vision. R.O. and J.M. were totally shocked and in utter fear, to the point of tears. J.M. accelerated away from the other vehicle. Now, at the same time, the other friend, T.G., never reacted to the sight of this being. He was either asleep or was immobilized somehow. He had no idea what had just taken place. Now, the encounter was so disturbing to R.O. that he literally begged J.M. to turn around and go back so that R.O. could kill the being with his rifle. Well, R.O. told me that he had never felt so repulsed before, that he had an overwhelming reaction that he must eliminate this abomination. J.M. refused to do so and continued driving away towards town. Now, R.O. stated that the incident remains fresh in his mind, that he will always be fearful that he may have once again encountered this being. He asked me to contact J.M. in order to verify the event, in which he did, though he refused to elaborate on the encounter. Now, many of you know the Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area, which resides in Kentucky and Tennessee, is well known for bizarre activity, including upright canines and Bigfoot. So the following account was forwarded to me on February 3rd, 2021. The witness tells me, in 1976, I was in the third grade. That spring, my elementary school class went on a class field trip to Smith Memorial Playground and Playhouse, located on North 33rd Street and Oxford Street in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We boarded the buses and headed to Fairmount Park section of the city. Now, the Smith Playground has been around since the 1800s. It has the world's largest wooden sliding board. Our class arrived for the day's fun using the slide and having fun with the other school kids that were there also on a class trip. Now, some of my classmates and I became bored, so we decided to make our own fun. We scaled a fence to another section of the playground where we came upon a swimming pool area. Now, in this area, we can see that the pool hasn't been used in years. There were so many leaves in the pool that its color turned dark green. We began throwing rocks in the pool until we again became bored, so we scaled another fence. Now, this next area had a pathway to our right. And as we began to walk down the pathway, I heard a female voice from behind me say, "Stop, children." When I looked back, there was this green lady hanging from the tree. And when she came out of the tree, I could see that she had scaly skin like a lizard. Her skin had the design pattern which covered her from top to bottom, as if her skin was also her clothes. She walked on 2 feet, and she had a small slit for a mouth. When she spoke to us, you can hear her in our hand. Her mouth never opened or moved. We rushed back over the fences, and I have never been back. I cannot remember all my classmates that were there, but after 40 plus years of questions, I found one classmate that remembers this incident. There were probably 5 or 6 of us. Through some research, I found an article from Times Daily Google News archive dated October 6, 1959, which describes an incident about a green lady chasing school children with a knife. Now, this does not fit the description nor the same green lady that appeared to us, because I witnessed something utterly amazing and out of the world. Now, I have been collecting anecdotes from readers who had personal experiences or were told of cryptids and anomalous encounters in Vietnam and other parts of Indochina. I received a particular narrative that was much different than the others I had been forwarded to me, so I decided to publish it separately. The post is a compilation of 3 emails which include answers to a few of my questions. The man who provided this information was, at the time of the incident, a U.S. Army corporal who has since retired from the military after a lengthy career. Now, he did not give me specifics as to his unit and mission, but feels strongly that his experience should be told. He provided 2 identification references, which did check out. Now, overall, this man served a distinguished military career, and his reputation is quite admirable from what I have seen. Some of this information has been edited at the request of the witness. Now, this is not the first time I've referenced this encounter. I'm asked about it a lot, but I thought it fit the subject for tonight's show. In 1970, I was serving as a corporal in the U.S. Army deployed to South Vietnam in a region about 30 miles south of the DMZ. Now, at the time, I was second in command of a squad of soldiers. We had set up a bivouac in a jungle area that had a few steep hills. That evening, my section was ordered to patrol one of the small valleys west of the encampment. We moved out, led by our sergeant. Not long after entering one of the small valleys, we detected movement ahead of us. It seemed to be a scattering of activity, so we doubted it was a VC, but we weren't positive. We hunkered down for about 15 minutes, getting occasional glimpses of something moving within the trees and brush. There wasn't enough light to detect what we were observing, even though the moonlight was bright that night. Now, after a while, the activity halted, so we continued to move slowly through the valley. Now, as we approached a sheer wall on the hill, it looked like someone or something had stacked large stones and boulders in the pass in front of us. There was also an opening in the hillside that looked like a cave entrance, approximately 5 foot high, 3 foot wide, narrowing at the top. When observing the passageway, it appeared to have been cut away by machinery. The edges were smooth with small, even-spaced grooves. We were puzzled by this because we had never seen enemy caves like this, just underground tunnels. The sergeant suggested that it may be a VC supply depot, so we started to assess that we were going to investigate the cave. Now, about this time, things got very strange. We began to notice a putrid odor emanating from the cave entrance. The only thing I can compare it to was rotting eggs and human decay. It was so revolting that the few of the soldiers were becoming ill and started to back away into the jungle, including the sergeant. Now, I was directing a light into the entrance to observe anything, but there was a haze that was impossible to see through. We had no idea what was before us. The entire squad took a position in the heavy brush approximately 150 feet from the entrance, far enough not to be detected, but close enough to observe the cave entrance. We quietly remained there for what seemed like forever. The jungle was strangely calm, though we heard rumbling sounds coming from the distance. It was really eerie. The sergeant was sitting near me talking to himself. It was obvious that he was frightened. I was looking at the rest of the squad. Each had wide eyes and scanned the area. No one was going to doze off during the patrol. Now, after several hours, dawn was approaching and it started to lighten up. I checked my watch. It was just before 500 hours. Just then, we noticed movement in front of the cave. A being, I first thought was a man, moved through the entrance into the clearing in front of the cave. As it stood up from a crouch, it stood at least 7 feet high and started to look in our direction. At that time, another similar-looking creature was moving out of the cave. They were making hellish hissing sounds looking directly at us. The only way I can describe these beings is that they looked like upright lizards. The scaly, shiny skin was very dark, almost black. Snake-like faces with forward-set eyes that were very large. They had arms and legs like a human, but with scaly skin. I didn't notice the tail, though they wore long one-piece dark green robes. I never noticed if they had anything on their feet. No one gave the order. It seemed like the entire squad opened fire at once. Every piece of vegetation between us and them was quickly sheared away. I yelled out a ceasefire order. At the same time, I was looking in the direction of the cave. There was nothing there. We immediately checked our flank in case these things circled around, but there was nothing. Now, as we approached the cave, ready to resume action if needed, it became apparent that the beings had escaped, most likely back into the cave. It was soon decided to set charges and close the cave entrance. Now, when we returned to camp, we had seemed to be in a daze. We all seemed to be in a daze. There was little discussion of the incident, and we were never debriefed. So I know the sergeant never filed a report. But then again, if he did, it was kept quiet by the brass. Now, in the autumn of 2014, I had an incredibly intense experience that I wanted to share with you. I discovered that you had investigated the praying mantis man sightings along the Musconetcong River in Hackettstown, New Jersey, so I wanted to contact you. My incident involves an encounter with an interdimensional mantid being, which I will refer to as the mantid priestess. Now, one night while in my bedroom, I was relaxing on my bed. I had been committed to my meditation practice and yoga. However, this night took an unforeseen turn. I experienced a sudden state of intense panic. As my heart pounded, I began to perspire and lose my sense of reality. It felt as though hours had quickly passed. Despite my boyfriend lying beside me, I felt alone with fear. I attempted to use breathing exercise and every soothing technique I could think of, but I had no choice but to surrender to the intense panic. It was then that things took an even stranger turn. My ears began to buzz with a high pitched sound which grew louder and stronger, filling my brain with terrible pressure. Then suddenly I went numb, and I found myself in a vast expanse of darkness. It was like existing in a black void stretching in every direction. I then realized I was no longer in a physical state, more like a shapeless energy. Now, as I floated in this void, I gazed around, and that's when I saw her, the mantled priestess. Her form was dramatic and sizable. She communicated with intuitiveness, compassion, and knowledge. Now, her appearance was horrible and shocking, but her presence was comforting to me and made me feel at ease. She wore a long and pillowy dress in the same style as 16th century European royalty. She was standing in a great room that was decorated in the same historical period. It was unsettling and intrepid, but still welcoming. She communicated to me that I needed to ready myself. The exact meaning of this readiness remains an enigma to me, but it left me with an enduring impact. Despite the dread I felt during the encounter, there was also a strange sense of encouragement in her presence. This incident has left a memorable tag on me. Occasionally, I find myself desiring this affinity with the mantled priestess, though I remain cautious not to allow it to overtake my human qualities. How would I react if I was ever in her presence again? Honestly, it frightens me to even think about it. So this next account, I was told by the witness back in the early 90s, I went on with a group to the Silver Falls Spring in Oregon. One night after dinner, I went for a stroll to find a clear spot so I could see the stars. After about 20 minutes of sitting quietly and contemplating the sky and the stars, a breeze blew through and rustled all the leaves and branches around the clearing. As the wind gently shook the trees, something caught my eye in my peripheral. I looked to my right, and there it was. For just a second or two, I saw what could be best described as a walking tree. Back then, I was just beginning to appreciate books. So at the time, I hadn't read anything aside from comic books or magazines. So now today, I can describe it as looking like an ent from the Lord of the Rings books or movies. Except it had more of a round head with a definitive neck attached to its shoulders. Its limbs were long and thin. It could probably touch the ground if it just relaxed its arms. There didn't seem to be a distinction or separation between the torso and the hip area. The legs looked like a pair of articulated tree trunks with no discernible feet. It had patches of moss randomly covering its torso and legs. It was about 20 feet in height. And it was holding what could be described as a long baseball-like club in its right hand going over its shoulder. Now, when I first turned my head to see what caught my eye while the wind rushed by, I saw it take 3 long and deliberate steps in a spot where the clearing met the trees. What sent a chill down my spine and made me freeze for what seemed like a moment of forever is that second was that it seemed like it turned its head and looked right at me and where I was sitting as it took its third step and re-entered the forest. I just sat there for another 10 minutes, feeling frozen in place, going over what I had just seen. Now, once I shook that frozen feeling, I got to my feet and went back to the cabin all of us were staying at as fast as I could. I only told one person about this after it happened, and they just found it to be a nice and creepy story before everyone turned in for the night. But it still haunts me to this day when I think about it. Now, I think this is the last account for this show. Hi, I'm a 52-year-old female, married with grown children and 5 grandchildren. First of all, Since this encounter, I have never forgotten it, although exactly what happened is a mystery to me. I was around age 6, and we lived in a trailer park in Greenville, South Carolina, in Mr. Hickham's trailer park. This would have been about 1976 or 1977. Now, all this information has been confirmed by my mom. It was a warm and sunny day. I was playing outside with my 2 older brothers. Now, I was the youngest of 3. It was a day like all the others. We were playing tag or hide and seek. I went to hide. I ran around the back of our house, and suddenly I ran almost into a humanoid praying mantis. Now, at the time, I thought it was a giant insect. I couldn't really comprehend what I was seeing. I felt like all the breath was taken from me. It was taller than my dad, and it was standing next to our propane tank. Now, years later, when I thought about it, I told myself that maybe there was a gas leak. Anyway, back to the mantis. I stood there frozen in broad daylight, and the creature was just staring back at me. And then everything is blank until I come running back into our trailer screaming that I'm in pain between my legs. My mother was so concerned that she pulled down my shorts and underwear to inspect me. She says nothing's wrong, and I go to sleep crying. This was this has always been with me. It and this praying mantis stayed in the back of my mind. Then a few years ago, I heard about a UFO sighting reported by the Highland, Illinois Police Department. Weird, I thought. We moved up there when I was 8 and moved back to South Carolina when I was 10 years old. I was telling my husband about this thing that happened when I was a kid. And we both laughed as I swore it really did happen. So I got curious and Googled the praying mantis aliens, and I remember it felt like I was punched in the stomach as I sat there looking at imagery exactly how I saw it over 30 years ago. I showed it to my husband, and he was in shock. I don't know what happened to me between my encounter and when I came running and screaming about burning down there. I had a real fear of monsters after that and a great deal of nightmares, but nothing like what I saw. It was all about bloody baby dolls inside plastic bags, scooting their plastic bodies around and down the hallway trying to get me. Also, another recurring dream was a farmer type man in overalls with a pitchfork walking by all my family members just to get to me. At the end of the dream, he would stab me in the chest. This dream started when I lived in Highland, Illinois. I have never been able to give birth naturally either. I have had C-sections. Now, my father passed away at the age of 38 from lung cancer, and I was only 15. It has not been an easy life for me, but I'm a Christian and find comfort in God's Word. I have tried to read more about this mantid human creature and have not got a lot of info. Usually, when I'm reading about it, right before bed, I fall asleep very quickly and get nowhere. I'm reaching out because I feel like this is really happening and not just to me. It doesn't matter to me to get attention via printing a story. I just want to know if you've heard from others who've had similar accounts like me. Now, I'm sure that this witness contacted me as a result of the Hackettstown, New Jersey encounters, which I did an episode of Monsters and Mysteries in America about years ago. I think it was 2014. But as far as possible physical contact, this may be a first one for me. Now, most people who have encountered these beings experience headaches and mental distress. I mentioned to the witness to feel free to contact me if she wishes to disclose further information, but to this date, I haven't heard back from her. So, folks, I know that was a bit quick, but if you have questions, please put them in the chat, all caps, so that Kevin can put them up for me. Any questions, folks? And look, if you've had something similar to an encounter like that, please feel free to contact me and write to me and let me know about it. I'm always open to looking into these type of situations with these unknown biological entities. Sir Wolf, Highline, do you think that mantis beings really look like that, or is some kind of illusion, screensaver, odd as we have small ones on Earth? Is there a connection? Uh, after I had investigated the Hackettstown incidents, and there were actually 4 encounters in total uh, during that period of time, I don't think there's any connection between those large human-sized entities and the insects that inhabit our planet. I just don't think there's any connection. They may look the same or very similar, but I just don't think they're the same thing. Now, that being said, uh, I don't know how many of you have seen that or remember reading the encounters, but um, it did leave some type of reaction with the witnesses or the experiencers. This thing literally vanished in front of their eyes as it was coming out of the river and going up on the other bank on the other side. But it did happen several times. It happened on a stretch of the river about a mile in length, some of it in Hackettstown, New Jersey. As far as what other people see are described as mantis beings, I do know that many times, particularly in the past 20 years, where we talk about abduction scenarios, there does seem to many times be a overlord or a being that's in charge, and it's usually an insectoid type being and looks very much like a mantid. Now, are these some type of particular being? I have talked about this with a lot of experiencers over the years, and I do believe that these mantid beings are evolved or metamorphosized reptilians. In other words, I think when they reach a certain point, and they've demonstrated that they should be in charge of a group or a squadron or whatever you want to call it of these beings that do the abductions. I think they metamorphosize into these type of creatures. Now, do I have any evidence of that? It's all anecdotal. It's just the way that these accounts have been mentioned to me. Now, I think they can still shapeshift to some degree. I do remember one experiencer telling me that they thought that they saw this thing change back and forth from a reptilian to a type of mantid creature or an insectoid creature. Many times I wonder if these things are even related to the winged humanoids. Many times that have that insectoid look, like the Mothman. Is it all related? I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was. Dagnammit. Have you ever heard about a solid black 7-foot bird-like creature in Texas with massive wings? A human-looking face that is all white, large black eyes, and a huge square mouth that is all red. I've heard a lot of different winged bird-like creatures, especially in South Texas. I've mentioned before that area between San Antonio south into Laredo, and especially around the area of Hebronville, Texas. For whatever reason, I have received a lot of reports from Hebronville, Texas. And that includes T-Rex type creatures, velociraptor type creatures, winged beings, that look more bird-like. Um, are these actual beings? Are these something that are just seen, being able to be seen by witnesses? I really don't know. But we have received something like that. Now, as far as what you described, I don't think I've heard of anything particularly described like that. But, again, it wouldn't surprise me if there was. Marla Snyder, do you get a lot of walking tree encounters? I get a few. Uh, and since Marla, you live near me, I had some particularly interesting ones down in Maryland um, over the years. The whole walking tree thing. I have seen some video. I have seen some, and I have had some very interesting descriptions. I just don't know what to think of it. Um, but there are people who swear they have seen these walking trees. I have looked at some of the videos. They look pretty good. But, you got to take videos with a grain of salt. I mean, especially with AI and everything coming, into its own now. Um, I'd be more cautious about relying on any type of video like that. So, but yeah, I have had several reports, and if I could put it together and put a good video presentation together, because I would need to do that to be able to prove it. So, yeah. David, evening lawn. Are there any dogman encounters in Florida? Oh, I've had several in Florida. Yeah, I've had not necessarily dogman, what you consider dogman, but upright canines, upright cryptic canines. Many what people would consider to be like a werewolf or some type of humanoid. But I have, and not a lot. I've had a few in Florida. The sightings are mostly around the Tampa area, the Southwest Florida area. I've had some. I had one in Miami years ago. I'd have to look and make sure which were which, but yeah, we do get them in Florida. Can Squatch. Many times reptilian encounter witness reports clothes or on uniforms. Any idea what that's all about? Witness clothes ORS. I don't know exactly what that is. I mean, maybe you can be a little more specific so I can answer it. Questions? Jose Sanchez, would you say that the mantis beings are the least ET reported? Uh, I think we've gotten more and more as time has gone on. They kind of, I'd say between grays and reptilians and even human like beings or Nordics or whatever you want to call them. Yeah, I'd say, because I just don't think there are that many around. I think they're mostly in the background running the show, and not a whole lot of people see them. They seem to, in every case, they always seem to have some type of authority. But yeah, if you want me to give my opinion as to how frequent they are, they're probably the least frequent. Real true. How do you feel about the veil getting thinner? I think the veil has always been somewhat thin, but I think people are more open to talking about it. Thus, we get more reports. Again, like I've said, with the internet and TV and all the other things, and people being more involved with the paranormal and the supernatural and cryptids and such, I think people feel less intimidated about coming forward and making reports. Now, That being said, there are, there are always going to be some really strange incidents and reports coming in. But as far as the veil thinning, yeah, but I think it's been like that for a while. It's just going to, we can get these reports and report them. It's just a matter of people taking the time to look at it, to keep an open mind. And I think that's the biggest part of it. Mary Mother Trucker, what does Dogman look like in your perspective? I don't know. I've never seen one. But the types of so-called dogmen or cryptic canines that we receive, especially here in Pennsylvania and Maryland, they're either quadrupeds or bipeds. The bipeds are the usually tall, upright canines. Many times it looked like, if you remember the Underworld movies, the lichens, a lot of those descriptions, even the height up to 9 to 10 foot, are very similar to what people have seen in those on those films. Now, again, do they equate it to pop culture? I don't know. Maybe they do. But as far as the uprights, that's normally what we get. As far as quadrupeds, there are similar types of canine-looking creatures, but for the most part, the dogman creatures, the ones we have called or referred to as dogman, have a like a hyena type of look. The sloped back, the large head, the muscular arms, and muscular legs. Just overall muscular. And they've got some great size to them. So that's pretty close to what we do get as far as reports, and it does deviate from that occasionally, but around here, that's normally the reports we do get. Any more questions? Jose Sanchez states that in Communion, the book, Whitley Strieber's book, the Greys seem to don on suits that resemble robotic characteristics. It was very weird. Yeah, if you're talking about the short beings, yeah, I have had just some descriptions very similar to that from some experiencers. And I've talked to Whitley about that. Years ago, Whitley and I used to communicate a lot before his wife passed away. And in fact, Whitley and I worked on a case down in South Carolina many years ago. So, yeah, I mean, and I have told him about what others have talked about. Any other questions? I see Nightbird has up here. Lon, what are your thoughts on Pamela Stonebrook's account to Art Bell of having intimate relations with a reptilian being? Does her story sound believable to you? She seemed very sincere. Great show. I remember when all that started. I don't know what to think about it. I was probably much more skeptical at that time than I am now, since I've had done some investigation, particularly with David Reckhart and a few other people who have had reptilian encounters. As far as having intimate relations with a reptilian, I don't know about that, because their overall demeanor doesn't seem like that would be something that would occur. But, it is what it is, and, to each his own. So, I don't know. That's the best I can tell you. Hans Roost, in that first story, what do you think it was? Which story was that? Oh, you're talking about the humanoid. I don't know. I get a lot of people ask me for me to read that a lot, and to even repost it and get permission to use it themselves. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what it was. It was a shapeshifter of some type, probably. Uh, it's just one of many other weird type of humanoid sightings that people have written to me about, who swear they've had these encounters with. And of course, it happening down there at the Land Between the Lakes area. I got so many weird things that have occurred down there. It's hard to really be definitive as to what that really was. The fact that you had two witnesses, though, makes it seem like it is credible. But everybody has their own perspective of what they're looking at. It's just like what we've been going through within Chicago. Everybody seems to have their own perspective, or certain people just have the ability to see these things, or allowed to see these things. Now, is that the case in this? Is that what happened in this case? I really don't know. But it's a bizarre story, and I don't think I've ever had anything like that as far as that neck and the way it was bending out and upside down and all that, and the way it was. I don't know. It's just a very weird account. Anything else, folks? Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for coming in here, and thanks for watching and chatting. And if you donated, it's truly appreciated. Your support is what makes all this possible. So please like, subscribe, and share. And if you have a sighting or encounter report that you'd like to be considered for the Personal Report Show, please feel free to send it to me at lonstrickler@phantomsandmonsters.com. And I have been getting more and more reports from people who are watching my videos. So that's great. And we've gotten some really good ones. So if you have something to share, please feel free to do so. So until we meet again next Friday night, stay healthy and safe, and have a good week.